guess the easiest way to start is just probably like you were doing.
Okay. Well, I've been asked to speak by my grandson Alexander a little bit about my life and how it ties in with the rest of the family. So I was born in India and I have no recollection. I was 2.5 when we left and went to France. My sister was born in Marseille. I remember a little bit about that. I have a bad memory anyway. It isn't the fact that I don't want to remember it. My sister was married, but she was born there, and I remember the nurse saying that if I finished my oatmeal, that I would either have a little brother or a little sister, and I did. I had a little sister.
Do you think that's your earliest memory? Can you think of any memories, whether it be good or bad?
Oh,
Most
and
people
then,
remember
but we
bad
used to go back to France because my grandparents were living there. They were white Russians. And so to me, France, Marseille was a very comfortable place to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on, we went on to live in Spain. And I lived there 7 years.
So how long have you been there?
I started from the 7 years, actually it was 6 years, went there age of 4, and from there we went 1 year, we lived there 6 years, went to German school there. We used to take the train from Las Arenas all the way into Bilbao and learned German. So I did 4 years of German, and then we went 1 year in Canada, and that was terribly exotic. We didn't understand. My sister didn't speak any English.
What year do you think this was?
32.
1932?
Yes. Yeah, and so that was completely different for us. My sister spoke hardly any English, and we went to public school, and I used to translate for her. She finally dropped out because it was just too hard for her. But she was very happy. She learned how to tap dance and how to swim in the lake. And I learned about peanut butter. I thought it was absolutely never had anything as good in my life.
Never had it before.
Never had it before, and I overate it. It took me a long time to get to eat it again. Well, there was nothing to do there really for Daddy, so he closed the office, and we were moved to Morocco, and that felt like home. Our Spanish dog was so happy. Our Spanish maids were happy because Tangier was international. We spoke Spanish, French, English, whatever was there, and I was thrown into a French school, lycée, at the age of 10 without a word of French. Luckily, my mother could speak French, so she helped me with my studies and homework at night. What, dear?
Oh,
Go ahead.
one thing is, talk to me when you talk. Look
All right.
Make eye contact with me. Don't worry
Okay.
about the camera. The
All
camera
right.
is unimportant.
Yeah, all right.
It's really just a conversation between us two.
Yeah, all right.
And I wanted to ask you what your mother was like. 'Cause I think
My
that's-
mother was Russian, very, very cultured, put it that way. And she was a concert pianist and loved to laugh, but never did any housework in her life, but she was very neat. And so she found it was very strange in Canada, too. So the ladies came over and they said, we play bridge every Thursday. And she said, what if I don't feel like playing bridge on Thursday? The only thing she learned from Canada was how to make date nut bread and strawberry jam. So at least she learned that. My sister tapped dancing my mother how to make jam date nut bread, and that was the extent of her housekeeping.
And what did you learn in Canada?
I learned, I won't say that word, but shall I use that word?
Yeah, go ahead.
I used it. I had my diary open. My mother saw it, and it had written there F-U-C-K. And my mother carefully took me and said, Katya, come here. And she said, we don't use that word. We use copulation. And I said, yes, Mother, not knowing what either one meant. So I don't think I used either one. I'm sure I didn't. Well, I said, our dog Chaval was a ratter. He came to us to Canada from Spain. All the dogs picked on him because he was always he couldn't speak English. So when he got to Morocco, it was fine because he could speak, a little bit of Spanish with the Spanish dogs. Got along very well. So school, when people ask me about Morocco, I can mostly remember picnics. We always had picnics on the beach. We had the town beach. Everybody had a little hut, which was brought out in the summertime. And there was a little, like a porch built out of bracken. And I could smell the bracken that summer. And then inside we changed our clothes and we went swimming there, and all our friends. And on weekends, Daddy would drive us out to the Atlantic beach, where they had built a small little house for us. No water, no electricity, and we used to bring water in gallon jugs. And we had a refrigerator, Cervelle, which ran on kerosene. and made wonderful ice. And so we would sometimes at midnight get up, go across the street and swim on the beach there. It was called Doolittle Beach. My maiden name was Doolittle. Yes, Doolittle Beach is still called that. It's a little different now because they've used a lot of the sand to build the apartments in Tangier, so it's a little muddy at the beginning, but the waves, we go further out now. And so as I went to the lycée, at 14, I'd got my certificat d'études. So Daddy was worried the fact that I did not speak English at all well, so he sent me to Switzerland, to an English boarding school, but he didn't realize it was a school for English girls to learn French, so we had to speak French all the time. So it was fine for me.
It's a little bit of an oversight, huh?
Yes. But so we did also English, but I had started at 14, so I'd missed out on grammar, so I don't think I'm very grammatical as it is now. But vacations are wonderful. You took forever. You took a boat, a P&O boat, from Marseille. You take a train from Geneva all the way down to Marseille, then you take the P&O boat and you land in Tangier. And the boat would come out, and then the first year, my sister, we'd always fought. But she came out on the tender to pick us up, and we had a boy with me who went to Holland to school, Hans de Testa, and she cried when she saw him. She'd missed me so much. We never fought after that. It was just wonderful. So anyways, so we went picnics, and Daddy would never let us have any real free time to get in trouble. So I had to learn how to ride horseback, do dressage. I had to learn how to type. I had to do all these things. But in between, we had a lot of friends. We lived downtown, right next to the Camel Market. It's now a bus stop in Tangier. And so all the friends, most of them lived up in the mountains, and there's nothing much to do there. So they'd all come down, and we'd all gather. We'd go down to the Soco Chico, to the Española, a cake shop, and have cakes. We'd go to the movies, and we'd play at the house in my garden, hide and seek and everything else. So that was, house was always full of young people, and then they would have to go back to the mountain. If they missed the bus, the last bus, they'd have to walk all the way up. So then I graduated at 16, and I could have gone back to boarding school to apply for university, and I just couldn't. I missed my smells, spices in Morocco. And we were down one day at our beach in Medina, which is the Atlantic beach, and sitting around, all of a sudden we saw a car driving down quickly down the steep road. It was a friend of ours, Sergei Suwarin, who came and said, "War has broken out in Europe, the Germans, and we have declared war on the Germans."
And how old were you at this point?
I was then 16. I'd been a year in Paris, gone to art schools. So I couldn't go back to Paris. I forgot to tell you, I went to Paris after Switzerland. So I went to the lycée that winter in Tangier and took French literature and history. And then we had to go home because my sister and I, being American citizens, and we had declared war as well, so we were sent home to the United States, and we all went back together, Mommy and Daddy, on a destroyer, on a freight ship. And we stayed with friends of ours, Carlton Kuhn, that we had met in Morocco.
How did you first meet Carlton?
I met Carlton actually in a nightclub. There's a nightclub called the Amsala Gardens, where everybody had their own table. And if a young man asked me to dance, he had asked my father's permission. And Daddy would look him up and down with his green eyes, and I would say, "Please, please." And then I could dance. So Carlton Kuhn was there. He was Harvard professor. He was on sabbatical. And my father pointed out to me, he said, "That's Carlton Kuhn. He's a professor from Harvard. I'm just showing him some Neanderthal cave Daddy had found." And so he came over and asked me to dance, and I didn't ask to have permission. I thought he knew who I was. Well, I was 16 and a half, 17. And so he was flirting with me, and I couldn't figure out why. And because I thought he knew who I was. When I finally told him who I was, he just dissolved and laughed and laughed and laughed. He thought it was so funny. And so then he said to me, "Well, I can't marry you because I'm married, but I have a younger brother at home."
So how old was Carlton then? How much older was
Oh,
Carlton?
he's 12 years older than
12
Morris,
years older.
yes.
12 years older than Morris, and Morris
Yep.
was
Well, when I met Morris, he was 24, and then we got married, and he was 25, I was 19.
It's been an exciting time. The war had just broken out. What do you remember of? What do you remember of the beginning of World War II and the beginning of the German conflict just as a young girl? Do you remember?
Well, in the Tangier, most of my friends were going off, the British and the French going off to go to war, so we'd go to the railroad station or the airport and say goodbye to them. And so when I arrived in America by boat and I saw the Statue of Liberty, I was very upset because all my friends were gone away to war. And that was 39, 40, and we didn't come in till later on after Pearl Harbor. Well, my husband was a painter, and he was taking, realizing that, the war had started. His aunt had got him a job at General Electric, making, machines for the war and cars and trucks. And after that, he went back to Harvard and took aerial photography, just to be ready in case they needed him. And meantime, his brother Carlton had joined the OSS, and then he told the OSS they thought that my husband, Carlton Morris, would be a good candidate. So he did. So he went to the OSS and trained in Washington. And after that, he was sent to India, Burma, and China, and end up in the Naga Hills, training the natives to fight against the Japanese. And he was expert in demolitions and guns, and they just had gotten the RDX, which is the first time they used the plastic explosives. And so he also, being an artist, he took things and he made them look like statues or anything else, and they put those in with the fuse. And even though he said that he got sick, he got malaria, and he was in Major Seagraves Hospital.
So how old were you when he left to go to war?
I was 20. I got married 19, and my son was born, Kala, 1940.
So you just had
41, yes.
And you were
So I was,
pregnant with Seth,
no,
right?
I was pregnant, but I went to live with my mother-in-law and lived there for 6 years. So the whole time he was away in the war, I was living in Wakefield. We'd been living in Boston for a year.
So for 6 years he was away most of the
No,
time?
he was less. He came, let me see, Carla was already born. Seth was born 2 years later, and he was born while Morris was overseas in Burma. And then he came back, I guess, and then, Seth was 9 months old when he came back. And then I had, a year and a half later, I had Nana, my daughter. And my mother came back, came to visit, and she told my husband, he said, look, I left a very happy young woman, and I see a very sad young woman. Get her out of this house. Nothing to do with your mother, but she should have her own place. And it just happened that Carlton was moving from Harvard to University of Pennsylvania, so we bought his house in Cambridge and moved there when my son Kala was 6 years old. And
What was it like being a young mother with your husband away at war? Did he tell you what he was doing most?
we wrote every single day.
Did you
So sometimes I
have
would.
those letters?
Well, I have some of his to me, but he must have lost his. And so I would get maybe in a week, I'd get a batch of them. And there'd be a whole couple of weeks, there'd be nothing, then a whole batch. And he couldn't tell me too much, but he did little drawings of the different tribes, the Kachins and all these people that he was in there. And he'd always gone to Europe and Egypt, but he'd never been the Far East, and he felt in love with Burma and India, the whole atmosphere of the people and the time. He said, no one worried about the time. You'd sit in the evening, you'd just talk about philosophy and and love and art. He said it was so different from Europe, and he just loved it.
It's been hard for you. I mean, you were very
Yeah,
young.
I was young. It was not my house,
Yeah.
and
Did you
and-
worry about him? Did you worry about his safety?
I didn't worry about that, but I just definitely missed him so badly. And when he came back, and I said we finally moved to Cambridge, I used to meet my mother-in-law in Boston at Stern's glove counter. I don't know if they have glove counters anymore, where you bought your gloves and your hands.
Well, fancy department stores, but that's about it.
That's gone, and she apologized to me. We used to go out to lunch. She said, I understand it must have been awfully hard for you as a young woman, not coming from America, to live with me. And she said, I apologize. And I said, no, Mother, I learned a great deal from you. So we became very good friends. and she'd come and visit us. But to her, I was a child. It was children. And in a way, probably it's a good thing that we were there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I've been alone in Boston with, two little babies because Seth was born later on. And so I've been here. And then my daughter, so we used to always go back to visit my family because Daddy retired in Tangier, Morocco. And so anytime we have a little money, we'd go to visit. My husband would say, do we always have to go to Morocco, Tangier? And I said, yes. The same way we always used to go see my Russian relatives in France. And then eventually my grandfather died, General Bergman, in Marseille. And Daddy managed to give my Aunt Irina a job at the American consulate in Casablanca. So my grandmother, my step-grandmother, and my aunt moved there. So we'd take the night train and go spend a weekend or a week in Casablanca. So my life was divided between the American and the Spanish and the French, and then the Russian side. I think it was really.
What did Tante Irina do at the?
She was a file clerk, and so I used to walk to the consulate with her and meet her halfway, and she was. So when she came to this country, she had a pension from the American government, so she had some money of her own. Then eventually, 5 years later, she became an American citizen, and there were big parties in North Carolina where she spent winters with my sister, and here when she became an American citizen. Even a song was written about it. Yes, I forget. So she used to sing it. Keith wrote the song, and he played the guitar, something about Aunt Irina now is an American citizen, the whole song, I don't know. And so here I am, and then, we lived in Cambridge. And I guess in 1967, the children all had left. Nena was married, Seth was married, Carla was married, and we were all alone in the house. And some neighbors of ours offered us $80,000 for the house, and we said, my gosh, we can't turn that down.
Yeah, that was a lot of money.
That was a lot. So we sold our house and winterized our house in Marshfield and moved down in 1968.
When was do you remember the first time you ever came here?
It was 1941, and I wasn't married, and my brother-in-law, Jack Kuhn, was here, and my father-in-law was here too, and we had dinner, and I was introduced to the family, because my husband, when I was in college, I was 1 year in college, George Washington University, I had begged my husband to be pleased to let me finish at least 1 year. But he came down every single weekend and broke all my dates. So I gave up. And so I got married after a year. So that was 1941 I first came down here. And after that, Jack Kuhn had the house. But when he got through with it in October, we would come down with the kids. And eventually he bought the house across the way, and we moved in, and we'd come in summers, and probably was about 45 or 46. And eventually I said, we inherited the house, my mother-in-law, and she died. And we moved year-round in 1968. And I've been here ever since. But I still go back to Morocco because my daughter bought a house there. But she said, Mother, I'm giving you back your childhood. And I said, thank you very much.
Consider Morocco your home then?
In a way, because I was there from 10 to 18.
Those are impressionable years.
They are. Even though I went off to school, I'd come back and that was home.
Yeah.
And I think it does make it different that way. So even though I've been here since I was 18, I felt more American there than I do here.
You feel European here, right?
Yes.
It's always something, right?
Isn't that strange? I know it. So, but I felt very American because in those days, everybody loved Americans. And in the State Department, there were gentlemen, mostly career men. And so they were, remember Daddy and Mr. Blake, who was his boss, he was the minister in Tangier. He loved antiques. And so he fixed up, well, it then became the legation. He bought 3 or 4 houses and put them together. And it had a lovely courtyard, went across the street, the Rue d'Amérique. And then he also bought some houses up in the Medina, and he put those together. Eventually, he lived there. And Barbara Hutton, when he retired, Barbara Hutton bought that house. And he went back to Kansas. And his second wife was Gibraltarian Spanish, Rosita, and she went back to Kansas.
She must have loved that.
Well, they always say how she loved it, but she didn't.
Yeah.
I asked his son, her son still lives in Madrid. He said she was miserable in Kansas. And she died. She was just a lovely lady who used to wear, she had a lovely full figure. She wore a long dress with polka dots, back hair pulled back with a carnation in it. And very Spanish.
So I guess part of what I wanted to do with this is
Yes.
for you to try to think back on either side of your family, and if you can remember as far back as you know, and I mean, go as far back into Russian family as you can, or go as far back into Doolittle family as you know, and maybe start with, you know, your grandparents, but, you know, any stories or memories that you can, you know, trace as far back. I mean, what's the first thing you know about the Russian family and where they came from?
Well, it's very funny because the Russian family has absolutely no Slav blood in it at all. My grandfather, 3 generations before that, they came from Sweden, the Bergmans. And they were Livonian knights, or the Baltic knights, Baltic barons. They came to fight Catherine the Great and everything else. And my grandfather, so his father, he also was a General Bergman, went to school with Alexander II. So Alexander II was my uncle's godfather. And so grandfather fell in love with my grandmother, who was half Polish, half French, when she was 14. Must run the family. She had measles, and he went to see her. He was a young officer. And somehow he managed to persuade my great-grandmother to let my grandmother, be married at the age of 16. She was married. She came home about a couple of weeks later, didn't like it. So my great-grandmother, who's French, said, look, it's your choice. You can stay here a month, then you're going back. So she did. Then she fell in love with the young officer, and they had a very, very happy marriage. He was up in the Caucasus. Well, my grandmother's father also was a General Poto. And we don't know. We think it may be a Romanian name for the Poto. And so my grandmother was half Russian. Well, no Russian. She's Russian. They're like Americans. They have all kinds of, yes. So she was half French and half Polish. And my grandfather, the Swedish one, his mother was Hungarian. So it's really a mixture of things, and no Slav blood.
Do you remember him?
Grandfather, yes.
What did he look like?
He was tall, a white beard, very blue eyes. And I remember in Marseille, in one of the apartments, because they always lived in very poor apartments, no hot water. I was so used to it. You go in the kitchen, you start your little stove going, and you get hot water for your washing and having your tea. Grandfather sitting below with ex-officers all singing "A la Verdi," which is a song they sang because they came from the Caucasus where all the tribes were, which is what's happening now. And then I learned afterwards that when he died, they didn't have enough money to take his body out and bury it. And somehow the word got out to his ex-officers, and they all got together and they raised the money so that grandfather could be buried. And he's buried in the Russian cemetery in Nice, France. But those things, they were very poor, but I never was conscious of them being poor, because we were always people around and everybody was sharing the food and everything else. And so that is as much as I know. My grandmother, great-grandmother, who came from, she was born in Besançon, Cernier, Wanda Thérèse Cernier. There must have been trouble again in France she was I guess Russia was always either taking the Poles or fighting the Hungarians or whatever. So she came over as a governess to the Russian family and met General Poto, who was a historian, he my great-grandmother, for the Russian army. And then, I said, she married my grandfather, who was a background of Livonian, Swedish background. So that's as much as I know. I have it written down somewhere that goes a little bit, but not that much. I don't think they wrote down on my father's side. That's a little different because we know that the name was Doolittle, and Abraham Doolittle came here in I think it was 1642, and he was a nonconformist minister, and went through Holland. First wife was Dutch, Allen, and came here, and then she died, and he married, but he had 9 sons, so all the Doolittles are related, because there's only one that came here, and they apparently, the name Doolittle was, it's Norman, Doolittle, and they came from Scotland, and so that was anglicized to Doolittle by England. And he, so they found in Wallingford, Connecticut, the New Haven colony. And so that part I know as far as, 1600s. And,
Yeah. Well, I know that history goes back very far, and
Yeah.
I guess,
oh yeah,
especially just your memories of maybe, your oldest relatives, which would be your grandfather.
my grandfather and grandmother, and then American grandfather, Grandpa Frank, he came to France to see us. And he and my Russian grandmother couldn't speak to each other, but they'd go together arm in arm and drink champagne in the cafes. They didn't need to speak to each other.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I feel American, I feel Russian, I feel French, I feel Polish, I feel anything. And I guess in a way, my son Seth, first wife came from Yugoslavia, and the second wife was Dutch. So we have all that. So my grandson has Dutch blood, and also on the American side, they were mostly Dutch. They were Knickerbocker Dutch. They came over from Holland as well. So in a way, I have lots of Dutch blood, which I share with my grandson. And
It's nice being a mix.
yeah, it is. Well, it is
When
America.
I meet people, I'm probably have their blood.
Exactly. I think the most here that in this country that can stay one are the Irish, because they usually marry. Because now they're intermarrying more with Italians and Poles, etc. Yes.
Jews also
Trying to keep, but the rest of us. But I mean, it's a wonderful country. You can see that we have all these mixes, and all the different laws, and each state has a different law that we all get along together. So we have to keep that going, and stand up as being gentlemen and ladies to show the rest of the world that we are that way and that it can be done. So, so I have no idea. I love my grandchildren. I've had luck that I've been able to see them, because I have a house by the beach, so they come and stay with me. If I didn't, if I had a small apartment in town, I don't think I'd have the same privilege.
I would come and see you in town.
Well, it wouldn't be the same. And I have seen that my granddaughter, who has my first great-grandchild, she's sort of eyeing the place. Because she works, she gets sort of saying, well, little Tatiana, I think it'd be fun to have her here. And then my other grandson, he's having his first one. He lives in New York. I think it'll be rather fun, so I have to keep myself in good shape.
Yes, you do.
So I can get the great-grandchildren to walk down the beach and play with
Just
them.
your 80th birthday. I mean,
Yeah.
it's quite an accomplishment.
You didn't have to do very much, just breathe.
How old was your mother when she died?
83.
83.
So I've got 3 years.
3 years. But your aunt was...
98. My Russian grandmother was 99. And on my American side, great-grandmother, her name was Filena von Falkenberg Grosbeck, Dutch.
Quite a name.
She lived to be 94. So I have a little bit on both sides. And
Longevity's in your blood.
yeah.
That's good.
So, but you have to take care of yourself too. It is not enough. And exercise, drinking less,
Yeah.
giving up smoking. Okay, nothing really else, and enjoying myself. I said, I'm lucky. I have a very poor memory, which means that I have to learn things all the time. I have to keep looking things up in dictionaries, and then I get sort of entranced with on the same page in the dictionary with something else, which I immediately forget, but that's all right.
I think people with poor memories, I think I have one myself. I think we're happier.
I think so. I know, you don't have that garbage in your brain that's going to bother you. Mine is so transitory. I worry a little bit, then it's gone. What was I worrying about? So,
Well, I guess, I've always wondered what my grandfather was like, because I didn't really know him very much.
you mean Anna's father, your grandmother's?
No, I wonder about him, too.
I never knew him, but I knew Nana.
Yeah. Did you ever know Wim?
Yes. Yeah,
Did you know
he
Wim?
was very, very sophisticated man. I mean, he came here, of course, he already divorced from Anna Alexander's grandmother, but he always complimented you on your cooking. He complimented Anna. He said she always cooked turkey very well, and man of the world.
Dapper?
Very
Well-dressed?
dapper, well dressed, and but I guess rather a playboy, I gather from neighbors. Yes,
Thin mustache? Did he have a
little mustache
Yeah.
and sort of blondish,
Yeah.
and
Tall, short?
medium height, not tall. Yeah, I'd say about 5'10" maybe, most. And I just met him that one time. He came and had Thanksgiving here with us. And then when his second wife came to the United States, she came to visit, and she said, well, my husband Wim said, go visit the Coons because they're just like us, normal people.
Yeah?
So,
From what I've met of them now,
yeah, right.
a close family who
Yeah.
are,
Well,
lovely and
sort of middle class, upper middle class, and
not extravagant.
no, I think this is why I got along so well with Anna de Groot van Emden, who is my son's mother-in-law, because we came in a way, same background, European, and we laughed together, and we were both interested in the same things, and being sort of silly together, too.
Didn't have a great memory either.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
For some things, other things not at all.
No, but see, as you get older, you can remember things that you don't realize you remembered back. All of a sudden, a name pops up, and you remember a silly chicken in Spain when we lived. It was an insane chicken. It would sit on a terrace waiting, and all you could see is little red eyes. You came into the garden, opened the garden gate, he would attack. You're
Attack
right.
chicken?
Yes, it was an attack chicken. I think eventually the cook. In those days, you ate what you had in the garden, so the cook would take the chicken out in the back, and she'd cut the head off with an axe. Well, I hated that. Same cook came with us to Morocco, so her husband was a boxer, and he couldn't stand it. So when she was going to kick chicken, we would go outside, and we'd sit on the cemetery wall, Moroccan one, and we'd say, do you think it's dead by now? And then we'd go back to the kitchen, where she'd be plucking it, getting it ready for a meal. And
Yeah, now you just buy them in the supermarket.
yes, now we get them all wrapped up. I know there is a lady in Plimpton who has chickens, and they're free range, and she has very good eggs. But she names all her chickens, so you might get Alice or something like that to eat.
You know what?
I'm not sure that I want. But that is, are we so far away from what life is?
I agree.
Everything is just, I mean, right now I'm getting very conscious when I eat a hamburger that it's a cow or a bull, I'm eating a heifer. And I just not that happy about it. Or dog food, you wonder what's been ground up in that. And
I think everybody who eats meat, I love meat, should maybe have to butcher an animal at some
Right.
point to understand
what it is.
because it's, I guess there shouldn't be morality in food, but you remember that being a human means you kill to eat.
Right.
I mean, it's,
Animals do it.
yeah, we think we're so gentle.
Yeah, but we're
people, I
not.
think, but every time we have a hamburger, you have to think that somebody...
It's removed somewhere over there,
Yeah.
yes. But you try not to remember how it's done.
Yeah.
My granddaughter Catherine, when she spent a semester, half a year actually, in Spain, Zaragoza, with a Cuban family who'd they left Cuba and they went to Spain, and they were both vets. And he told me that in Cuba, there's very little meat. Just the older people get, I think, a kilo of meat a month or something like that. So being a vet, he would get a horse, and he would fatten it up. He'd take it out in the fields by himself, and he would butcher it. And he would cut it up and freeze it. And he said, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to eat as well as we did. That, I think, horrifies people who have pet horses, and you tell them that. But that, again, is life. So they just don't.
That has a lot to do with our society in the way that
Yeah.
everything's done for us and packaged for us and
You're
takes
right.
the unpleasantness out
Yes.
of life. And
Well,
then,
death, too.
yeah, we don't deal very well with death in our society.
No, when Mother was dying, I was here, and my aunt would call me up. She'd say, your mother's very ill, so I'd call up, and my mother would say, I'm all right. I'll tell you when I'm dying. So Auntie Rena finally said, I think it's the time. So we got there, my sister and I, in Morocco, Tangier, but it was too late. She'd already died. But she was laid out in her bedroom, They come in and wash. The janitor came in and washed and dressed as janitor's wife, actually. And they had 3 candles, so they had the Trinity. And we all slept the night there. My daughter was there. She came in from France, and my sister was there, and I, and the 2 Spanish maids, and my aunt. And it was a very peaceful, peaceful night. We all slept with my mother, quietly lying there. And I've never been as close to death as that before. And I found it's not frightening, and it was very lovely. And
do you think about your own death?
once in a while, yes. I mean, I know it doesn't seem possible that I will die, but I know I will. But I just can't tell. So that's why I worry about my brain. I don't want to have Alzheimer's, because I wouldn't know then. But even then, I think, I used to visit a lady who was 105, and she told me she was not frightened of death, but she was not looking forward to it. It was the same way. Yeah.
Why don't you don't need to look forward to it?
So I just don't know. I worry about religion. I just can't understand it at all. Yes, I know that it helps people tremendously.
Have you ever felt any particular pull towards religion?
When I was 14, at the school I went to in Switzerland was a Anglican school, very Anglican. So we had prayers in the morning in the gym. We also had prayers at night in the chapel. So I used to go down there at night afterwards by myself and get on my knees and ask for anything, just a little, some token to tell me there was something beyond just life. And I never got one. So when everybody got confirmed at the age of 16, I did not, because I didn't feel that I had the right to, because I didn't feel anything. But I've been questioning ever since. And I'm always fascinated with people. My aunt, finally, my Russian aunt, age of 19, she was in Russia, and she lost all faith because of the revolution. And then she knew there was a void in her life, so she started studying all of religions, all the philosophies, until she finally said Christianity made more sense to her because it was a religion of forgiveness. And she became really a real believer. And I used to go to church with her, and I just envy her that. And I still, here I'm 80, I still am questioning. I just don't know. I just know anyone who believes, I ask them, and they don't even know why. I'm going to talk to a neighbor who just gave up business, and he's becoming minister, and why, how he believes, and what is it that Bill Taylor. So he's at BU, and he's a Methodist. He said BU has the best seminary for Methodism, and he is done in 1 year. It's just like going back to college. And he has now, I went to heard his first sermon, and he's been sent. When you belong to God, you don't have much choice. You are sent where you're sent, to have a parish somewhere else, and you obey. And so he's now in Rhode Island. His wife goes down and see him weekends, because it's a training he gives. I suppose it is, before you become a full-fledged minister, you have to believe, you have to learn, you have to, to me, it's a complete puzzle, and it's just, I'd love to, because I work down at the Council for Aging, and they're wonderful ladies that belong to St. Anne's Church down in Brant Rock. And Alice Doobie, she goes to Mass every morning, and she's funny, she's wonderful, she's in her 80s, and to me, it's, I can't explain. I don't know, how do you feel about it?
Oh, I guess the same way. I never got my answer either.
No, but I'm still just
but I still
waiting.
question all the time.
Yeah.
I believe in the principles of religion.
Yes.
That forgiveness and
Yeah.
sort of, love is basically the strongest human emotion, and as well as hate, I suppose.
Yeah.
The two sides of the coin, and that all religions try to explain these two feelings and sort of all of the complications that each of those feelings creates. Hate, jealousy, and
Yes, it's a matter of living with your neighbors.
Yeah.
And so you do the best you can. Of course, we're all very, very human.
Yeah.
And so you find you have little bits of snobbery, and you know it. Yeah. So you try and kill it. And you can be very big when you're slightly snobbish, because you're sort of lowering yourself to the lower class. It's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, it's what we are, and we are just, and so you have to go, I suppose, that's why people become Buddhists or, Muslims or anything else, because they can get away from their feelings of not quite being adequate in their own religion.
Yeah.
And, I don't...
Buddhism, I think Buddhism's pretty smart.
Well, this is what I want to know.
It's inside of you.
Yes.
And you know that, you reach nirvana. It is not some deity who is up above touching your soul, but you're achieving enlightenment through deep, deep meditation, which is all, you control your own belief, basically, because it doesn't center around an invisible man with a beard who will help you get a new car or whatever it may be that you want.
Yeah.
It's something that you have to find and you have to get yourself.
And you think of the American blacks. They have a white god around them. It must be hard. And you think of a little black baby being born. Happy, he's with his mother and, drinking his mother's milk and being hugged and said. And all of a sudden he gets older and he wakes up and he finds that he's black and that people are white around him. It must be awfully hard. If you're in Africa, it's another thing, but here, I often think of that, the terrible shock of that. Going to school, and...
Were you conscious of race when you were growing up?
Well, I'm embarrassed now because in my school in Morocco, we were Spanish, not too many Americans, maybe one English, a lot of local Jewish children, and one Moroccan girl. And she said that the worst thing that could have happened to her, she said, I get education, I see what the world is like. When I get through this, I get put back into the Moroccan ghetto, because it's changing a little bit now. But no, you had the high-class Moroccans, the rest were servants. And you just took that for granted, so you never learned Arabic. You learned certain things like, open the door, shut the door, how much is this, is expensive, and thank you. But never went out and learned the language. It's their country, too. This, again, is the leftover colonialism. And then...
It'll never go away.
No. And our maids were Spanish. One could write, because she'd gone to convent school, the youngest. But the older one, Paro, was illiterate. Daddy taught her how to read a little bit, but she got tired. She'd rather listen to the novelas on the radio, which was like, sitcom.
Yeah.
But again, when my sister got married in Cambridge, they were there. We did all the hors d'oeuvres. We had the reception at the house, and we were going off to the church. Our neighbor came over and got hats ready, Jessie Spalding, and she had hats for the maids. And they said, no, we can't wear hats. She said, why not? She said, we're maids. Only senoras can wear hats. She said, the hell, this is America. You're going to wear a hat. But again, so you live with that, you accept that. Yes, it's all around us all the time.
What about in like the 1960s when camels?
Well, this is the old. All the others are just Egypt. So it's an inkwell. And this, and then I got somewhere. I love it. Reading somebody. And this is Krishna. That's from India.
I assume the Harry Potter is a new edition.
That's your mother gave you that.
Are these pictures, Morris's?
Yeah, they're monotypes. And he loved boats. I love tugboats and he tugboats. And this is when, what's his name died? Kennedy died. Oh, he sold a couple like that. Somebody said, that's a memento when, Kennedy the other day, he did a monotype.
What are these pictures over here to the left?
Both are little sketches for larger paintings, and mostly loves geography. So these were, I think there even went up in the attic that he started to do a big painting of it. And these were in the trash, and Natasha's friend, Mitzi, who's a sculptor, she said, oh, those are wonderful. She dragged them out the trash and said, keep them, so we framed them. And those are Nana's, I found those up, so we're not had them framed. Did a long time ago. What, yeah, I have no more. Christie's house. We said, that's a wonderful painting. We never realised how good that painting was. It's really a wonderful painting.
Yeah.
I said, Menzies are like that because they reminds me when they've gone fishing or something like that. And the first thing in the morning when you see before the sun comes up, you see the flowers. And that's when you know. I'm through. I've had my sandwich. No, no more. No, 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 no. And you've eaten yours? Eaten your supper too? No? You eat your supper now? No. So you have no more. All done. Look. See? Lola understood. Angelina go, all gone. All gone. And she understood. You don't understand. She said, all gone. See? All gone. All gone. All right? All right?